What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Meaning of Podcast. I am Ace.
This is RD3.
And this is the podcast where we talk about your favorite movie directors and the themes within those films, because that is what the Meaning of Podcast is all about. And today's a good episode, guys, because we're finishing up our Black History Month with Mr. Spike Lee.
Yeah, who's done the most prolific and probably the most commercially viable and successful. Maybe not commercially, not Ryan Coogler has like two of the biggest movies of all time.
Probably the most legendary.
Yeah, most legendary. Yeah, and the most celebrated, and so this is an exciting episode.
Yeah, with Spike Lee, he's got a lot of movies, guys. So we're probably not going to run through each and every one of his films, but we will talk about the larger impact he's had on Hollywood in general, as well as the running themes within his movies, as well as his background, a little bit of his history. It's going to be a really fun episode, guys. We want to incorporate you as much as we can. So we're going to be reading your comments from last week's episode, where we talked about Ryan Coogler, who you just said he's probably the most commercially one, at least now with Creed and Black Panther.
Yeah.
But he's only done 3 films, to be fair. Whereas Spike Lee has done like a lot of films.
Yeah.
So we're going to do that, guys. So let's start out with some comments from last week's episode. Once again, please leave us comments. It's always a fun time to read your comments. If you're an iTunes listener, we appreciate you as well. Trust me, we don't forget about you.
Yeah.
RB3 always mentions you, and he always mentions you guys to me. He's like, iTunes guys are pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I'm like, are they? I don't know. No, I'm just kidding. But we appreciate you guys as well. So make sure you guys hop on YouTube and just leave us a comment or a like or something so you can support us and support a different kind of podcast.
Or even tweet at us too. I mean, we
Twitter is always fun too.
Yeah.
Try to see what more we can do with Twitter.
Yeah.
Since we're not the most, well, at least you're good at social media. I'm not. I just post whatever's on my mind. And I guess that's what social media is.
That's what social media is, man. Just live free. I mean, Trump's doing it on the toilet 5 a.m. every morning. So
our president is making it okay to do that stuff. Let's read some comments. Brian Souter says, another great episode, gents. Thanks, and I'm definitely sharing. Who trumps Tony Stark in scientific genius? Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four. Yes. I actually read this comment as I was, going through the comments.
Yeah.
And I know that when I was talking about the episode, but I was talking MCU. MCU, the smartest guy in the MCU is Tony Stark. Tony Stark.
Kevin Feige said Siri is now the smartest.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Tony Stark and now Shuri. Shuri is like the two that probably keep up with each other the most. Mm-hmm. Probably a Banner as well. Bruce Banner is up there.
He's up there, yeah.
Peter Parker, I've talked to you about him. He's not the smartest in the MCU, but he is in the comics. Mm-hmm. But yeah, in the comics, there's Reed Richards. I mean, Stephen Strange is super smart. Yeah. Tony Stark is obviously super smart. Peter Parker in the comics is a super crazy genius.
Yeah, but Reed Richards by far in the comics.
In the comics, Reed Richards is known for creating like crazy. Like he made the number 42 prison in the Civil War comics, which is like a freaking parallel universe prison, which is like only like next level genius people can make.
Yeah.
It's funny because the Marvel comics is something that I don't know as well as the DC comics. I love DC. I'm a DC guy, which is why it's always funny how DC people come after me. But I'm actually on your side, guys. I prefer DC. I think DC's better. But as far as the movies, I want to see them succeed in the way the comics succeed. But in the DC universe, for me, it's always been Lex. Wow. Lex is the smartest dude around. Obviously, there's Batman and Bruce Wayne and all that. But for me, Lex is the one who's like, this guy's boss level intellect.
Yeah.
But yeah, Reed Richards is great. We'll see if he ever comes up in the MCU. I think he will come up in the MCU soon.
Oh, really?
Soon. Oh, yeah. I mean, especially with
the Fox.
With the Fox and Disney, with the Fantastic Four kind of failing. I think that's going to happen sooner than you think.
So you think even if the deal doesn't go through, it's still the rights are going to last back to the MCU? Or?
I think so. Yeah. Even if the deal doesn't go through. Fantastic Four. Yes. X-Men, it's going to be hard. Because I think Fox is gonna.
I think if the deal goes through, they should still leave X-Men separate.
They won't. I'm 100% they won't.
Yeah, mm-hmm. I don't want to see Deadpool with the Avengers. I don't want to see
Deadpool.
X-Force.
No, anything rated R, they won't.
Yeah.
Anything rated PG-13, X-Men movies, they will.
Yeah.
So Deadpool, X-Force will probably stay separate because it's rated R. But the PG-13 X-Men movies, like the Jean Grey movie that's coming out, the Phoenix one, that kind of stuff, it'll probably it'll probably join in, or they'll just erase that and make a new X-Men.
Yeah, I don't want to see him recast it 3 times. You know what I mean? Like, we already had the
Get ready, RB3, because it's gonna happen.
We already had Spider-Man 3 times. It's like, oh man, I don't want to see X-Men all over again. You know?
Yeah. Gunslinger 199 says Coogler is really great. I didn't like the fate of both villains, but it did make sense in the movie. The only other thing that I didn't enjoy were the action scenes. They felt like too much CGI and not very exciting. Yeah, I mean, we talked about it a little bit. It was a little too CGI, especially the last one. I like the car. I like the car scene.
I like the South Korea scene. There's really like 7. There's the 2 gladiators kind of scenes with the fighting on the road.
Those two
Those
loved.
are great. Those are the best scenes.
Those are the best.
I guess if you count South Korea as 2 different scenes, I count them as 2 different scenes. Like the one in the casino and then the car chase.
That's a great point.
I think those are 2 great scenes as well.
Agreed.
And then I think
the final fight.
The final
is
2.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, there's 3 separate fights in that, right? I mean, there's the plane. There's the plane thing, the rhinos, and the underground thing. I think the plane thing was actually kind of cool because I liked when Siri did it earlier in the movie with the South Korea thing. I like him doing it kind of too.
Yeah.
It was a good way to keep him involved. He was either just going to sit around or it could have seen as like a white savior thing if he came in at the end. I didn't want to see that either. But like him being kind of separate from the action was kind of dope. And I thought the CGI was wonky and like the train thing when they're fighting. And I don't want to, I kind of like that they're both wearing like Black Panther suits or whatever. But I thought like the actual fight itself was kind of cool. How they incorporated like the vibranium neutralizers and they're kind of even playing field. But you know my feelings on the rhinos. So
Daniel Kaluuya riding a rhino.
Yeah.
X Shiny Diverge says Ryan Coogler to me is the best director going today. Fruitvale Station, Creed, and Black Panther are all incredible emotional films that are about so much, unlike a lot of other directors who aren't consistent in such ways. Yeah, I mean, I read a tweet last week that said, name a director with 3 films as good as Ryan Coogler. 3 first films as good as Ryan Coogler. There's not a lot. I mean, there is a few, but there's not a lot. I mean, maybe Fincher, if you don't count Alien 3.
What's the you can't
7,
count that. But 7 and
the one with Michael Douglas.
The Game.
It's still
not as good first 3 as Coogler.
Taika Waititi, I would actually put. I mean, with What We Do in the Shadows.
You definitely say Tarantino.
Hunt for the Winter People. Wow,
Hunt for the
Wilder People.
Yeah,
and Thor Ragnarok. Those 3 are. That's pretty solid.
Yeah. Tarantino obviously, like I just said. Spielberg, I would put up
Spielberg.
there.
With Sugarland, Jaws,
and then Close Encounters. Those are 3 great movies.
First 3 films though, Ryan Coogler is like, there's a very few directors who have first 3 films that are that good. Like 3 films, there's probably a lot, but first 3 films, those are 3 badass movies, man.
Yeah,
those are like really, really, really good movies.
Yeah.
So that's.
I'm still like
crazy.
trying to rattle in my head what other director
has 3 first films that are that level, that good, like great.
Trying to think, what's Paul Thomas Anderson probably up there too?
Yeah, he probably has some good ones.
Hard 8, and then Boogie Nights, and then I think Magnolia. So those are 3. That's 3. That's 3 hitters right there. I don't know, man, but yeah, that's definitely right. Like Coogler has like that, and it's funny, like they all like vary up in scale. I mean, a lot of times a lot of times back before it was like smaller budget, medium budget, and that was like literally indie, medium, and then big budget, like and
huge budget,
gigantic budget.
Yeah,
it's not even like a 50, 60. It's like $200 million being spent on that.
That's crazy. Because when I found out that was a budget, I was like, oh damn, that's a lot of money.
Yeah. And if that movie would have failed, man, it probably would have toppled any hopes of seeing any like black heroes or like black superheroes like really coming to prominence again.
But not only did it succeed, it has the biggest second weekend box office ever.
Yeah, well, after Last Jedi, or I'm sorry, after Force Awakens, right?
After Force Awakens.
Yeah.
It had 108 million.
It's even bigger than the first Avengers.
Holy crap. 108 million second weekend.
Yeah.
You imagine that?
Yeah.
That's next level, man. That is next level.
Like literally, like I was driving back here, and I was hanging out with my mom's earlier. But I was driving to here, and then she calls me because she went to the mall after. And she's like, "Yo, what the heck? I've never seen this many people at the mall movie theater before." And like in Carson, like next to Compton, our city. I'm like, she was like, "What's out?" I was like, "Black Panther." And she's like, "I thought that was out already." It's like, yeah, people are still seeing it. So I mean, it's showing up in the box office numbers, and that's amazing. That's more than most Marvel movies make on their first weekends.
That's insane.
So that's awesome.
Can you believe that this movie started out, and I know we're kind of ranting about it, but this movie started out as like projected at like 85.
Yeah.
It's going to make like 85, and you're like, all right, no, it's going to make like 120, and you're like, all right, no, maybe like 150, and then it's like it surpassed like all of that.
Yeah.
That's just crazy to me,
nuts.
man.
It's nuts. I'm so happy to see it doing well, though. This is next level.
Absolutely. But yeah, we appreciate your guys' comments. Make sure you guys leave us even more comments. We'll be reading them every week. We always read a few of them, so we're just going to pick them out, pick and choose anytime we see them. Mm-hmm. So thank you guys once again. And now let's get into this week's episode, which is all about Spike Lee.
Yes.
Spike Lee. You know what I notice about Spike Lee the most? He's very New York.
Yeah.
More than anything else, he's like hardcore New York, which is dope. But he has a ton of movies, and I'm going to give you the wheel a lot during this conversation because, to be honest, guys, full disclosure, I haven't seen the majority of Spike Lee's films. I've seen quite a few, but not as many as I want to be considered like an expert within this conversation. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to have RB3 kind of take the wheel. Like Carrie Underwood says to Jesus. But RB3 is going to take the wheel right now. I kind of want to get into a little bit more of a conversation of his impact, his history, what he's done, what he continues to do, what he represents, and what his legacy is as of right now, as of 2018. Yeah. Because I feel like he's already left a ginormous legacy within his whole, not just within the films, but within his whole family of films, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Because there's themes that go within these films that can branch out to Netflix series like She's Gotta Have It, which is a Netflix show, and it's a movie, right? So he has branched out into making, content and movies and the types of themes that you want to see branched out, and not just film, but in kind of any area. He's a franchise within himself.
Yeah, no,
he's like a Spike Lee franchise.
Yeah, I mean his whole production company, 40 Acres and a Mule, is one of the biggest multimedia things happening. And you could definitely look, and when you talk about his family films, you could literally look at like his other family, like he has. And his family, in terms of his actual cousin, I believe Malcolm Lee. Malcolm Lee, who's done films like The Best Man, The Best Man's Wedding, and all of these. Best Man Holiday. And a lot of these different other kinds of films as well. He produced Love and Basketball in the early 2000s. One of my mentors is Lee Davis. He's a guy who worked under the Bill Duke organization while I was there. He produced his first feature. Spike Lee did because he was Spike Lee was his mentor. And again, like Spike has had such a legacy of he's an educator at NYU, so he teaches kids, and his students actually end up working on his sets, and he pays for all of his. I don't know if he pays for his students, but he takes his students on trips to the Cannes Film Festival every year. So he has a big impact in like influencing and converging the young generation. And you talk about him being a New Yorker. He's from New York. He's from Brooklyn. He's had a lot of his movies, if not all of them, are set in New York. And they all have a distinct like New York feel. And he went to NYU, the same place that filmmakers like Martin Scorsese and Oliver Stone went. And I believe he was even taught by Scorsese. And his master's program film, which is Joe's Best Eyes Barbershop. Ang Lee was an assistant director on that. So he has had a place with a lot of different filmmakers, with a lot of different types of movies. And even to this day, he's directed more than just films. He's done a lot of music videos. He's done a lot of documentaries, which we're going to talk about later. He's done a lot of, he was a director of 2K17, the video game.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, that's awesome.
He directed the story mode in that. So he definitely has like a lot of, and we're going to talk about how much he loves basketball when we get to some of his later films. But it's just so fascinating that he has this huge affinity towards all types of different kind of media and outlets, and he hangs out with a lot of like, you know, he's front row at every Knicks game. You know, he hangs out with a lot of like rappers and kind of uses hip hop as his kind of influence of his style too. But he's also a genuine movie fan, and you could tell that all throughout his work. When we talk about Do the Right Thing, there's that whole sequence with the love and hate that's taken right, you know, it's kind of paying homage to a Jean-Luc Godard film, and a lot of different. He has a very strong sense, and at his class at NYU, he gives like his students a list of movies that they have to watch. Very diverse, like, you know, old classic movies and such like that. So
he's a student of film, and he's a very creative guy.
Right.
Where it's like he has his own voice, his own style, and he's very creative, but he knows his stuff. Like, he's a very knowledgeable, you know, guy who's very much a fan of film and a student of the art of film in general, which I realize now more and more that's so important. Mm-hmm. Like, it's so important as a director. I mean, I'm doing this podcast for I don't know how many episodes. What episode is this? Never mind.
23.
But for as many episodes as we have and learning about these directors, I think the biggest thing that stands out the most, obviously having a voice is extremely important, but I don't know, maybe watching, I saw an interview with Coogler talking about how he, you know, obsesses over just film stuff. Mm-hmm. Film stuff meaning like shots and composing shots and lighting and stuff that personally I'd be like, nope. I just want to see the guy, you know, have a choreographed fight and get kicked in the head. Right. That's it. Right. But as far as like, you know, actually putting that stuff together, you kind of need to know your stuff. And I think Spike Lee has proven throughout all his filmography, even in his first movie, that he knows what he's doing as far as on a technical aspect.
Yeah.
So as far as his history, you said he went to NYU. Is there anything else that stands out as far as like how did he get his break in a film?
Well, how do he got his break? I mean,
shorts, right? He started doing short films.
Doing a lot of shorts, and you know, doing a lot of times when you do like master programs at like film schools, that's really the way you get to meet like a lot of not only like your peers who you end up working with a lot of times, but you also meet a lot of people who are, you know, looking to recruit some people. But also his shorts and kind of going not to how he got his break, but like kind of a piece of background that's I guess kind of important to him as a filmmaker is that his father was a jazz musician. Mm-hmm. So and like a lot of his films have a very heavy jazz feel, even to the point where his early stuff was actually composed by his father. So and like, you know, again, very like distinctly Americana kind of feel and iconography in his movies, just based around the music. But then also on top of that, you know, going to his break. I mean, She Gotta Have It was his first. Like,
that's his
feature.
First movie. Let's go into that because She's Gotta Have It is a
super indie, super low
budget, and now it has blown up into like I said before, an entire Netflix series, right?
Right,
it's a Netflix show,
right. It's a Netflix show.
I haven't seen it, to be fair. The Netflix show, I've seen the movie obviously, but the Netflix show I haven't seen. But as far as She's Gotta Have It. You know what's funny, man? Obviously, the themes of the movie stands out the most. Yeah. But personally, as a fan of music, that's another thing that really stands out in this movie. And you said it. Like, his father was a jazz musician. Mm-hmm. You can tell by watching She's Gotta Have It as far as the music, right?
Right.
Am I crazy for
that? No, that's like literally.
You're looking at me
exactly.
like, nah, man.
No. That's
music's
exactly that's exactly what it is. I was thinking too that they have that great scene in She Gotta Have It where like the one scene in color early on when
that's right, the musical scene,
the musical sequence,
La La Land.
Yeah. But that's kind of his homage to classics, and he does the whole it's the Wizard of Oz homage, like click your heels 3 times, and it goes to color, like, and you know, Wizard of Oz was in sepia before it went to color too. So yeah, again, like the music plays a big part of that. But
the themes of the I know I'm starting with this, but it just stands out to me. The theme, the actual theme, the one that the dad's playing in the piano, mm-hmm. and the one that plays towards the end of the movie too, where she's having her final monologue.
Right.
That theme is like so. It stands out a lot, like a lot.
Yeah,
it's just so catchy. Mm-hmm. You can just tell that it's really freaking cool.
Yeah. No, he definitely has a love, and he kind of cuts his movies. He edited She Gotta Have It, and you know why he doesn't edit his films later on. his editing style is very indicative of like a jazz rhythmic kind of disjuncture and like the rising tension of each cut. There's that one sex scene early on in the movie where she's on where like they're on the bed, and then it kind of flips like when they're like in different positions, and the music increases and accelerates as like the cuts get like more rampant in that moment. And I just think that's Spike's style. That's the way he's always kind of enjoyed like the rampant cutting, the kind of disjointness of like a jazz musician might have, but like also the rhythmic and this movement transition to those moments too. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, another thing that stands out in the movie is the fact that it's super indie. I mean, it's black and white. Yeah. I mean, you know, I was thinking about this the other day too, because I saw a movie this year that was in black and white, a very indie movie that was in black and white. And it's funny because when people do it in black and white nowadays, when filmmakers do black and white, they do it in a sense of like, I'm gonna be artsy. But back in the day, people did black and white because it was cheaper. It was just cheaper, man. Yeah. So it's so funny when people like nowadays it's like black and white. It's this. I'm gonna be an artsy guy. Yeah. But back in the day, I was watching this movie and I'm like, yeah, you do that black and white because it's cheaper, man.
Yeah,
you save your money. Because that's the indie film way, and the way he shoots it, the way it's shot, the way it's directed is very indie. You can tell it was very much like a low budget kind of feature film. Yeah. But at the same time, it's a very interesting story because it does that whole character introduction, fourth wall kind of breaking story narrative where
it's almost like a mockumentary kind of.
Yeah, exactly. What was her name? I can't Nola?
Remember. Nola, yes. Yeah.
So Nola, you know, starts out the movie. You know what's funny, man? The thing that stood out to me the most.
What's that?
The opening shot, as far as like Nola's apartment. Yeah. Nola's studio, I guess is what she called it. Mm-hmm. I was like, damn, that's a big ass studio.
Yeah.
That shit ain't cheap, man. Because there's a scene in the movie where Spike Lee in the movie, his character Mars.
Mars.
He comes in and he's like, "Oh, cool place," and she's like, "Yeah, you know," and he's like, "Oh, can I move in?" And she's like, "No," she's like, "Man, this is a really cool. How much did you pay?" And she's like, "Oh, it's super cheap," and I'm like, "No, it's not. That place is huge. Those ceilings are like 30 feet high, man. That thing is enormous." But that's the first thing. Anyways, it's just a side note of me being like, "Damn, Nola. Yeah, she's a successful artist. That's why everyone wants to be with her." Right. But anyways. Essentially, it's about the story of her and the way she deals with relationships and how she doesn't. It's crazy because if you see this movie as from afar and if you see it with a full judgmental perspective, Nola's low key. She's kind of. I don't want to say the word, but she's kind of like Santa Claus's favorite word.
I see.
But at the same time, but Spike Lee doesn't. But he doesn't present it that way.
Yeah, he doesn't judge.
He teaches you. He basically shows you a character that on paper you would say she's kind of, you know. Yeah. And he reverts that and says no, she's not. And he makes it a point throughout the entire runtime of this movie to tell you that she's not. Yeah. That she's liberated. Her own woman. Yeah. And that she's just doing whatever she wants to do, and fulfilling whatever she wants to fulfill and living her young life the way she wants to. Yeah. And you can tell that by the very end of the movie when she kind of tells you, you know, that she's chosen not to settle down or whatever. Yeah. And it's very interesting because throughout the whole movie, like I said, on paper, Nola is kind of like, whoa. But Spike Lee tells you that, nah, she's this is a new brand of a female. This is something new, not seen before. Right. Whereas like in the past, you would say that. But right now in this year, 1986, this is like the brand new thing. A woman who can do all this stuff and still be her own, you know, person. Yeah. And not be shamed, a label, not be labeled as something.
Yeah, and you know, it's you're right. It addresses like the themes of like sexual liberation, being free, being your own, and it addresses the double standard of like men and women, like how men could sleep with, like if it was switched around, the genders were switched around, and it was like a dude with 3 different girlfriends, like. It wouldn't even be like, there wouldn't be a movie. It wouldn't be like much conflict, you know what I mean? But because it's a woman, it's seen as more like controversial, more like edgy. But really it is getting to the nitty gritty of like, what does it mean to be independent and what, how you want to express yourself is how you want to express yourself. There's even that scene where Spike's character Mars is like, oh, there's no way she has to have a bad relationship with her father. She has to. That's the only way. And it cuts like directly to her father being like, yeah, she had a really good childhood, and like I taught her how to play piano. And then it goes to her and it's like, yeah, I really loved my dad. Like it's like of course, like that's not, you kind of want to put labels and stereotype and judge these judge a woman for like wanting to live her life the way she wants to live her life, but that's not the right way to go about it. And clearly people in her circle are more ignorant towards how, not ignorant, but particularly the Mars character is more ignorant to like how, and even there's even that funny scene where he calls her like late on her birthday, like after her birthday's already over, and he's like, hey, do you want to, let me come over, let me hook up. It's like, no, I'm sleeping. It's like, all right. It's like, man, I'm gonna be thinking about you. He hangs up the phone and immediately calls somebody else.
It's like, hey, Rebecca, I've been thinking about you.
Yeah.
It's like, damn, dude. Yeah.
So yeah, it addresses the whole double standard and the hypocrisy that comes in like the way people think of
yeah. I mean, obviously there's a lot of things in this movie that's very interesting to me. Obviously, personally watching the film, I never understood her desire for those other two guys, Mars and Greer.
Really?
Because Greer is an asshole.
Greer's an
and
asshole.
He's a weirdo.
Yeah.
And Mars is just no.
I see Mars because Mars is funny.
Okay, Mars is funny. I'll give you that. I'll give you that.
Laugh,
Mars is funny. You're right. But what's his name? Joel?
Yeah. I think Joel. Yeah, I think his name.
Joel. But he's like the actual like complete guy. But at the end of the movie, Greer says it best. He says that she never saw the three guys as separate individuals. Yeah. She saw them as one person. Mm-hmm. And the three people were actually three different character traits of their personality. Yeah. So instead of like me dating a girl who's like sometimes angry, sometimes happy, likes this, likes that, I'm dating three people who are very specific in their personality and like certain things and act certain ways. So when she wants the aggressive asshole guy, she goes to Greer. When she wants the funny guy, she goes to Mars. And when she wants the good guy, the sensitive kind of poet guy, she goes to, what's his name?
Jamie.
Yeah. Jesus, I called him Joel. She goes to Jamie. So she has the three different types of personality and sees them as one. And to the point that she literally has Thanksgiving with all three of them. Right. And all three of them know that they're in a relationship with the same woman. Yeah. It's odd for me personally, but it's funny how they actually incorporate that. Because I never saw what she saw in Greer. I was like, why? Because he's buff. I mean,
they had the muscle car.
Jamie's he's in fine shape too. I mean,
he's nice and he fucking writes poetry.
Yeah, I mean, he's in good shape too. Just because he's like not super ripped. I mean, I don't know. I never got Greer.
Yeah, he just I think it's the three different like I don't know things.
The one I was rooting for was Opal. Shout out to Opal.
Opal just didn't have a chance, man. Opal, but there's...
I don't know why that Opal scenes make me laugh. When Jamie is talking to the camera and he's like, I met a girl once and she was talking to her and I didn't like the way she was talking to her. And I asked her, are you dating this girl? And she told me no. And I believed her. And I was like, what? What is this? And then they introduce Opal. Yeah. And then it's like, they have like that weird relationship. Yeah. Where she's like, Opal and I have fun.
Yeah.
What kind of fun? And he's like, what kind of fun? Yeah. What is this shit?
It's like, what kind of fun? It's like fun. And then like, he immediately like confronts her about it. That's the funniest part to me, man.
I don't know why I love that scene. Cause to me, it's like, what would I do in that situation? I'd be like, damn it, Opal, I want to date you too, but get out of here, Opal.
They both want to take care of her, man. Yeah. But no, I think this whole theme of like sexual liberation and kind of, I guess you say like the style and the early kind of like vibrancy of like Spike Lee's filmmaking. We talked about the musical sequence in this film, kind of transfers over into his next movie, School Days, which is, kind of a semi-musical that's like a coming of age story as well. I find...
Can I say one more thing about?
Yeah, go ahead.
She's Gotta Have It.
Yeah, sure.
I know because we're taking so much time on it. Joy Lee's in this movie. Is that her name? Joy.
Yeah. Joy Lee. Yeah.
Yeah, that's Spike Lee's sister, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
She cute, man. That's it. All right, School Days.
Spike Lee's watching this episode like, motherfucker.
That's my sister. She's 50 years old, man. All I'm saying is like 1986, she was cute.
Yeah, she looked good and Do the Right Thing. Yeah. All right, we'll get to that. But yeah, School Days. School Days, not much really to talk about in this film. Samuel Jackson's and one of Samuel Jackson's early parts. And like I said, coming of age stories, like partial musical.
He really likes his musicals, man. He really likes that.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously that's a huge part of Spike Lee in general, but it's crazy how much that stands out as far as him really incorporating music into everything he does.
Yeah.
And this is also his working with Lawrence Fishburne as well, right?
Yeah, exactly, yeah, and the relationship they would end up having.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people really regard this movie at a high standard, but I think it's fun, and I think it, Spike Lee having gone before he went to NYU for his master's, he went to Morehouse for his undergraduate. So this movie is directly addressing like historically black colleges, which is something that Spike Lee was around when he was younger. So
yeah, also Giancarlo Esposito is in this movie too.
Oh, right.
Plays,
Bugging Out and Do the Right Thing.
Yes, and he's also
Gustavo Fring and
Gustavo in Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
He's also in Malcolm X for a quick scene. And he's in a few of his movies. He pops up.
Yeah.
And obviously, a lot of people know who he is too, because he's a very famous actor now, especially through his character in Breaking Bad.
Right.
But you could tell, first of all, running themes within Spike's movies already are appearing in his movies, because She's Got to Have It playing himself.
Yeah, well,
let's face it, Mars is Spike Lee in that movie.
Well, I mean, that's like his character, right? That's like his. That's how he kind of. It's like the Charlie Chaplin and like the Little Tramp kind of.
Yeah.
The Mars character just goes in and out. Of his, and he plays a big. I mean, we're gonna talk about he got game later.
Yeah.
And his basketball kind of thing, but that's like the main star of his Jordan commercials.
Yep.
Early on, not early on, but like later on in his career. So yeah, it's definitely is nice to see like a kind of like consistent figure in his movies.
And also music. Music is a huge part of what he does as far as musicals in general, and very traditional musicals, like you said before, with the musical scene and She's Gotta Have It, and also with the There's No Place Like Home scene, stuff like that really incorporates classic, but also modern as far as what he's developing with hip hop, like he does in Do the Right Thing, but also classic in the sense of jazz too, because jazz is it's a much more older type of classical feel for a lot of people. A lot of people regard jazz as a very traditional type of music that can stand the test of time.
Yeah. But yeah, you want to jump in and Do the Right Thing? I mean, we'll probably spend the most time talking about that one.
Sure.
Because it's probably regarded as probably his best film. Came out in 1989, the same weekend that the original Tim Burton Batman came out, by the way. And it's probably one of the more upon its release, the most controversial of his films. And probably to this day his most highly regarded. And I think part of that is because if you release this movie today in 2017, it's just as relevant today as it is when it came out originally. So
this is another one of his films that I've said before that is very much New York. Like it has that New York feel. Like a lot of the references he makes, a lot of the feel that he does in the movie is very authentic to New York itself. And obviously, who better to capture New York than someone who's from there, right?
Right.
Because you have so many directors nowadays go to New York, and so many production companies that are set in New York and that shoot solely in New York. But as far as Spike Lee, he makes it a point to really feel like you're in that city, like you're in that block, like you're in that neighborhood,
right,
with those people and dealing with the same types of things they're dealing with, and even the diversity you see in those areas.
Yeah,
I mean, New York is filled with Puerto Ricans and Dominicans and Italians and black and so many different types of people that live in just one block. Can be so many different types of races of people from New York, and that's a very New York feel in general. Is the incredibly diverse type of people that live there.
Multiculturalism is a central theme in a lot of his movies, but I think it even comes to prominence here, especially when you talk about the relationship between these races, right? The way people, not only the relationship between the the white or the Italians and the majority African American community, but also the relationship between the Puerto Ricans and the Koreans, and how there's some contingency there. And there's that great scene where I think part of what makes this movie so great is that there's varying different levels of, like, a lot of times when movies about race, usually a clear bad guy, clear good guy, but here there's like varying different levels. Obviously Pino, the older brother played by John Turturro, is very, very heavily racist. But then you kind of get you understand that the the father, played by Danny Sal himself, Danny Ariello, is that how you pronounce his name? Danny Ariello. Anyway, he has a very he has a very kind of storyline that reflects somebody who is willing to accept the neighborhood and willing to embrace the neighborhood, but also somebody who's kind of frankly using the opportunity to put his pizza shop in the middle of a black neighborhood, in a black community, to profit off of that. Because he has that scene with Pino early on. It's like when Pino's like, "Can we just move?" But his whole point is if we move, there's not like. If we go to any other white neighborhood in New York or in Manhattan, there's plenty of pizza places there already. So they open up shop here in this like minority, mostly black populated area to get money from there because there's no Italian shops that would normally service there. Same thing with the liquor store across the street with the Korean. And then, of course, it's coming out in 1989 where there are so many different relations between the Korean shop owners and the black community that even spilled into a lot of like the Los Angeles, which was one of the main causes of the LA riots. So it's a lot of different ways they address the different like varying shades of racism. And even Pino is racist, but he's not like full on he is racist, but he's a different kind of racist where he thinks that because the entertainers that he enjoys, like the Michael Jordans, or I'm sorry, the Magic Johnsons and the Princes and the Eddie Murphys, like they're not. He says they're not really black, but they're still his favorite entertainers. So it's different like shades, and I think that's what complicates the movie so much.
And that's what makes it so. Not modern, but modern. Yeah. In the sense of like when you see other types of movies that are African American central, and you have the white racist guy, it's always hyper racist. It's always KKK. I'm gonna shoot you and kill you and take your family, kind of racist. Mm-hmm. And this racist, like you said, is much more. It's different. It's more complex. It's more. Not in the sense that, I'm if you ask him, he's not going to be like, I'm a racist guy and I hate all people and I want them all to die. Right. Because I feel like that's also the issue with race in general, what we're dealing with today. Yeah. Right? Right. It's so many times we see racist comments from people, racist ideals and racist, stuff that comes from people. Mm-hmm. But if you ask them point blank, are you racist? They will tell you no. Yeah. Right? Because the way they define racism is KKK, all black people should die kind of racism. Right. And it's like, that's not racism anymore. Mm-hmm. That's racism 50 years ago, 60 years ago. Mm-hmm. Racism now is much more to be frank, what you're getting in politics nowadays.
Yeah, politicized, yeah.
It's much more, more political type of racism. Right. Where the vast majority of the people who are making racist regulations and racist type of things wouldn't consider themselves to be racist. Yeah. Would consider that to be a cop-out definition of who they are. It's like, oh, you're just making a cop-out. You just want to win the argument, so you call me racist. It's like, nah, you just really are racist. Mm-hmm. So that's the way Spike Lee addresses that in the movie is much more related to that time of 1989 and not just, the 1930s or something like that, right. Where you can see that in another film or where you could see that in like a 12 Years a Slave type of movie. Right. This is a much different type of racism. Right. And and I'm much more familiar with like LA history than I am with New York history, but of course they had like those riots that were happening in I think it was Bed-Stuy in 1977 that kind of influenced what happened at the end of this film. And you're right, like the way we discuss race now is so politicized and so people think it's like a controversial thing to talk about race, which it really shouldn't be. I think if we did, it will lead to a lot more acceptance. And I think this film also goes into that a little bit as well when Radio Raheem goes into the Korean shop and he's initially like barking at the owners for the D batteries, but then like he's being kind of aggressive and race kind of like racist undertones to the way he's addressing them, but he ultimately finds respect when the Korean homie is like motherfuck you, and he's like motherfuck you too, man. Like it's like a nice little moment of like it's possible if we talk to each other. And even that scene where he's with the Puerto Ricans and he's having like the radio contest, what I think what the movie is saying that ultimately if we hash out and just hang out with each other and just chill out, things would be probably better. But then
the movie also shows that at a certain point, that's not going to happen, and people are just going to be stuck in their old ways and their old ideologies. And I think that's really powerful in the sense. But going back to the original point of having the different external influences kind of seeping in, a lot of what was happening in the country was building to a sort of boiling point, not just in Los Angeles where we had the LA riots in the early 90s, but also, I mean, like I said, New York was having like their own problems, and just in general, the way that gentrification was starting to enter into a lot of minority communities, we really start seeing that a lot in the 1980s. We also start to see a lot more. Cop killings have always been happening since the beginning of us becoming a police state. But it was starting to become more of a national crisis in the 80s as well. So in the end, when Radio Raheem is strangled to death by the cops, is really relevant and really sustains what. And even the cops in this movie, they're seen as like the outside intruders, as the people who are like the overriding authority, the police figures. But then they even have like a scene where they are like kind of redeemable when the fire hydrant's going off, and then the jackass with the convertible is like riding through, and the cops are just like back off or whatever. But then of course they are still seen as like the territorial presence coming in, killing the fun, all that kind of stuff. So, and ultimately actually killing somebody in the community. So. There's a lot of different shades that they indulge in here.
Yeah, it's crazy how, like you said in the beginning of this conversation, talking about this movie, how it's still relevant today. Mm-hmm. How they talk about certain issues and certain things that develop within communities that are still seen within today.
Right.
It's crazy thinking about race in general. How it can be so much more. How the country and who is in the White House and how people view certain things can take race into a different level. I'm seeing much more now more than ever, Black Panther being the #1 movie in theaters right now, once again for a second week in a row, and making so much money and being a very historical movie, and still how it's some sort of a response to the negativity and the racism that we're dealing with today at a much higher level than it was even 4 or 5 years ago. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, there's different varying, I think degrees of racism that's happening.
Sure.
But I think it's much more prevalent, much in the forefront but I mean, even in the past, I mean, even like when we had like Richard Nixon as president, for example, and he wanted to kind of, shut up like the black people and hippies. That's the whole like idea of the war on drugs, right? Is like if we lock up hippies for weed and we lock up black people for crack, then first they're going to put the crack in the black communities, then they're going to lock them up for it. Then that's the way of silencing and isolating those people. And that's after the civil rights movement. So there's always, a lot of times with the White House has always been like a constant theme of policing and putting down minority groups. But then when Obama came in, it was kind of seen as like a new change, new era, which it was to a certain extent. But economically, African Americans are still like being put down, and the wages are lower than they've been. The median wages have been lower than they've ever been any time in like modern history. So, but when Trump comes in and says shit like shithole countries and has all these xenophobic and problematic, talking about bringing back stop and frisk, just more and more where the conversation has to be had about race, and I just think that's why this movie stands up to the test of time for so long, because you could watch this movie today and it'll still be just as relevant today, like I said in the beginning, just as relevant today as it would be any other time in history.
I see so many problematic things right now, and I know I'm bringing it to right now, but I do feel like that's the whole point in this movie. So whatever, it's my podcast, I'll do what I want.
Yeah.
But I really do feel, especially within having conversation with working in the industry, it kind of changes your perspective on certain things. But having a conversation with people, friends of mine that work in the industry and that I personally work with on a daily basis, and having a conversation about diversity and diversity in film, and conversations within this country that are happening nowadays being slightly more overt, if that makes any sense. And dealing with success of other people and dealing with success in general as a threat within yourself. I guess what I'm trying to say is that when certain groups of people succeed, whether that be Latinos, whether that be black people, even if it comes to something like movies, how that can be seen as like, dude, I've never seen anything taken so many people by like taken it aback. Like for some reason, people who've never talked about movies before, who are on the right, on the extreme right, whatever you want to say, have now suddenly developed an interest within. Let's talk about Black Panther and why it's problematic. Let's talk about this movie because it's, they really go out of their way to specifically name this movie as a problem and as a negative effect on people and on mindsets and as a threat to their white race and their white ideals in a sense that I've never seen before. Whereas before it's like, dude, who cares? Like, just move on and stay in your lane kind of thing. Where it's like, talk to your base and do what you want to do. But now it's like, now they're talking about specifically movies that they're going after. People who've never had an interest in movies have suddenly picked up their pitchforks and kind of gone after it in a very overt kind of way. And making it a very political conversation. Whereas I just will never understand how people can claim to be not, quote, not racist, and yet pick up their pitchforks and go after black movie, let's take it down. And it's like, wait a minute, why are you doing that? That's racist. And it's like, no, I'm not. I'm just picking this movie. And it's like, why then? If you have, there is no need to defend your race against another race unless you feel superior to that race. If you have the need to defend the white race, then that says more about you than it says about anything else. I just told you that before going on live. When it's like, oh, I gotta defend my white people, and it's like, why? There's no one attacking it. You're the one who's feeling that. You're the one. If you feel that, then you're the one who has those racist thoughts, bro. So I don't know, man. For me, that's so problematic right now, and it frustrates me because I really don't see. I'm not the kind of guy who sees in two spectrums of red and blue within the political atmosphere of this nation. I'm not that kind of guy, to be honest. And you know that too. And you're not really that kind of guy either. As far as like, I'm not the kind of guy who's like, oh, anyone who's for Trump is evil. Anyone who's against. I'm not. No, of course not. That's so dumb. We're saying Republican bad, Democrat good. No, they're both bad.
They're both bad.
They're both very bad. And it's one of those things where I don't see those two sides. I see good on Republican. I see good on Democrat. I can see bad on. There's varying sides to this. And yet I feel the pain and the frustration of seeing one side start to develop a narrative that fits their mindset, and they feel the need to defend themselves against something that is not even under attack.
Yeah, no, I
sorry.
No. I mean, yeah, no, I mean, I agree. And I think that, I definitely think that when we're looking at the broader spectrum, I think that's just the way the country has like moved in like the direction of being able to like use social media to like defend whatever platform you want to defend or whatever, stand on whatever soapbox you want to step on. And you're right with the Black Panthers obviously getting a lot of backlash for. Well, not a lot, but like a lot of
more than I thought. A lot of stuff that's coming up on my feed is like, why is this coming up on my feed? This isn't even stuff that I click on, and yet it's coming up because they see my search history and see Black Panther or something on it, and then I see all these Black Panther reviews that are like anti-Black Panther just because it's Black Panther.
Yeah, I mean Ben Shapiro had a weird.
I saw that. I didn't click on it, but I saw that video pop up.
Yeah. But I will.
Did you see that?
I watched some of it. Sometimes I watch Ben Shapiro's reviews because sometimes I actually agree with what he says. In terms of movies, like everything, like 99% of his views is like fucking retarded. But like, I'm sorry, not retarded. I didn't mean to say that. But I mean like messed up, not discriminate against mentally ill people. But
dude, again,
yeah. So my bad. But. His review of The Last Jedi was funny as hell to me. So I don't know. But his stuff with Black Panther is a little weird. And he's bringing in like a lot of these, I just don't, I don't vibe with what he has with that critic, not critic. He's a political commentator who wants to talk. You're right. A lot of times when it's like movies that like normally most people wouldn't talk about, they have to find like, oh, the SJW agenda or, oh, it's a propaganda, It's like, I don't know, man. I don't get it. But I mean, but that's kind of the same thing what happened when Do the Right Thing came out, man. It was so controversial. I mentioned before on this podcast, I incorrectly mentioned that I think I said LA Weekly had like 5 think pieces on this when it came out. It was actually the Village Voice. It was 8 when this movie came out initially. That had like a lot of different think pieces when this film came out. And when this film was initially screened at Cannes, people were so worried about, oh, riots are gonna break out. Oh, and then even when the film came out, I think even one critic said, I'm paraphrasing, but even one critic had wrote that they thought this movie was gonna incite riots and that kids should stay away from it or whatever. So it was a big controversial national conversation when this film came out by people who normally wouldn't even talk about film. And I think that's what it was so like controversial and how it approached things. People were when the Oscars came around, the Oscars literally went with the safest choice they could have found, and Driving Miss Daisy. And I can't even remember the movie that beat this for like best screenplay was something like
RB3 wasn't even there, but he still remembers.
Yeah,
man.
well, I don't remember. I don't remember personally, but I like read a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
The movie Oscars, they had to go. They were going with safe choices.
Sure.
And they only nominated Do the Right Thing for best original screenplay and best supporting actor, which is like a lot of people would consider today not only one of the best movies of that year. A lot of people consider this the best movie of that year. Most people consider it the best movie of the 80s. A lot of people consider it one of the best films of all time. This is one of my personal favorites. So it's just crazy. And addressing kind of like the modern day context, of course, there's the stuff with police brutality when it comes to figures like Eric Garner, Michael Brown, Tamir Rice. This movie just hits the way, and it, like I said, varying degrees of racism are on display here. Various like ways it approaches the topics of like gentrification of people, of like race relations. There's that whole scene when like it goes to each individual character and like everybody's just kind of spewing into the camera like a bunch of like racial slurs and like giving like their thoughts on, I guess, what they think of other races. And again, I think is complicated in the way that it addresses that stuff, but it's really impactful as well. Yeah. So this is definitely, to me, this is my favorite Spike Lee movie. It definitely has like that feel of being, now my kind of question is, and of course, is the introduction of Rosie. The cast, a lot of the cast are newcomers at this time too. Martin Lawrence, his first motion picture. Rosie Perez. Not Robin Harris's first movie, but Robin Harris is one of the 3 old guys sitting in front of the brick wall. There's a lot of like young up and coming Samuel Jackson again in this film as he was in School Days. So there's a lot of like cool, interesting talent in this. My question is, this movie kind of receives, one of the criticisms that I kind of consider in this film, and you can kind of look at Spike's work and She Gotta Have It too, is the fact that he, directs, stars, and acts in his films with like female characters that often includes himself in the sex scenes, right? With this one with Mookie and Rosie Perez with She Gotta
Nola.
Have It, yeah, Nola. I don't know where you land on that kind of.
You shouldn't have asked RB3. Yeah. You should not have asked me that, RB3. Because I absolutely see that. Yeah. That's the first thing I noticed when I was rewatching She's Gotta Have It. I'm like, brah, you just wanted to put your face in that, brah. You just wanted. There's no way you don't. There was a specific shot in She's Gotta Have It where I noticed that. Yeah, and I was like, that too, yeah. you know what scene I'm talking about? Yeah. I don't want to say it, but I noticed that shot, and I'm like, no man no man would put that on film unless they want to do that themselves. Okay. That is kind of a very fair point, and to the point that I absolutely do see that. Now, obviously, it's not to the point of like I would say that's like, he's being a problem against women or something like that. But I do see that as a very much advantageous type of thing, where taking advantage of his position. Absolutely. Of course I see that. Yeah. I mean, he's not dumb. You don't have that kind of level of intimacy with a gorgeous Like, dude, he casts like the most beautiful women, and I was thinking about that too as I was watching She's Gotta Have It Again and Do the Right Thing. Bro, those girls are fine.
Yeah.
Like he says, fine. Like they are fine.
Yeah.
And it's like you don't cast those type of girls just because they're great actors. You cast them because it's like, all right, now I'm gonna make out with them, and it's like, you dick. Of course you would. Yeah, I definitely do see that.
Yeah, I mean, hey, I mean, I don't, you know, I see it. I see that as a pattern in his films too. I mean, I don't know how much I'm going to judge his filmography on that.
I'm not going to judge his filmography, but I definitely do notice it. Is what I'm trying to say.
But yeah, no, I mean, but those scenes are shot beautifully, man, and the cinematography in all of his films is particularly with Do the Right Thing. You know, shot by Ernest Dickerson. You know, they kind of really encapsulate the heat of the New York Bronx, like that dead. You know, everybody's drenched in sweat. You know, I think they even lit like artisan canisters under the camera lens to like emphasize like the heat waves that's happening. And even I think some of this movie was like shot in the wintertime, so you can even tell like some of the scenes, like a couple of scenes have like clouds in the background, very like, but the way they shoot that, they put a lot of light on the characters, like have them drenched in like sweat, and the costume design, there's like real subtle choices with like the red backgrounds. It really emphasized like the heat, and that's what, you know, it's funny, this movie kind of is like a series of events that kind of lead up to the big in riot thing, because you know, it's interesting, the whole thing with Bugging Out, again played by Esposito. He that whole thing is funny because a lot of people think, oh, he just has this chip on his shoulder. Oh, he's, you know, he just wants brothers on the wall. But really, when you really look at that scene, he's not mad because there's not brothers on the wall. He's mad because he didn't have enough cheese on his pizza. Like, that's really where it came down to. And that's how the whole events of this movie kind of sparks out. You know, he keeps putting the Parmesan on, and Sal tells him to stop, and this immediate. And he even says he goes to Sal 3 times a day. If he goes to Sal 3 times a day, why doesn't he have that problem before? But it's because of the heat. He's hot, he's mad, he's furious. And because he didn't have enough cheese on his pizza, that now we have this whole riot spill out, an entire shop burned down, a young Radio Raheem killed, and the community in shambles, which is, you know, and again, you know, it's funny, and I don't even know why I mentioned in that order. I should be putting Radio Raheem first and then the shop second. But I think that's also a thing that Spike Lee also has a big problem with when talking about this film, because he says a lot of times when he's doing Q&As or interviews, a lot of times white reporters ask him, did Mookie do the right thing? But when nobody asks is, did the cops do the right thing? Was Sal right for saying the N-word and you know, trying to, you know, and breaking his radio? You know, is where are you really drawing the line more towards destroying somebody's property, which, you know, which I interpret that as, that whole sequence as Mookie making a conscious decision to throw the trash can in the window to save Sal, because they were going to go after Sal. They were literally going to like beat homie up and his family. So would you rather have, after one of their own died, of course, after somebody in their community died, so it was better to destroy the property where the insurance could pick it up later, rather than, you know, having like violence against the people. And I think that's really sad, especially when we talk about modern cases now of like Eric Garner, Michael Brown, and Baltimore, and Ferguson, and all these different places where people, the media gets so hung up on, there's riots, oh my God, people are destroying property, where, dude, a life was lost. Like, that should be that should be the story. You know, why are you spending time talking about this when you should be addressing directly how police brutality is still a major problem in this country? How now that because we have cell phones is more, we're exposed to it more. Do cover pieces on how that was a big thing in the past too, and how this legacy of over militarized police has still taunted our legacy as Americans, and towards the black community. But no, people want to talk about property damage, the CVS's, or the stores, and everything is just, you know, it's like, come on, man, let's focus on the real issue here. Yeah. But I digress.
Yeah. No, I feel you, man. That's absolutely true. It's always one of those things where the small action is focused on more than the bigger action. Yeah. Depending on who's doing it, right?
The property could come back. Like, you could rebuild, you know, insurance is there for that purpose, but like, are you going to really measure that up against the loss of a young man's life?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Any other words on Do the Right Thing?
Nah, I mean, Do the Right Thing, man. But this really set him off into the next level. I think this film is probably not solely responsible, but one of the big reasons why he's known as the Spike Lee he is today. And
this gave him the legendary status already just with just with this film.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So he had, after following these movies, he had 3 more movies that came afterwards: More Better Blues, Jungle Fever, and Malcolm X. Now, obviously, the one that stands out the most is Malcolm X, but what do you think of those 3 films in general?
Yeah, I mean, Mo Better Blues is, again, another example of the jazz influence. It's about a jazz trumpeter. And his first collaboration with Denzel.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, so, and they're all wearing, like, the Zook suits still. Like, this carries over into Malcolm X, which we were going to talk about more extensively. But Mo Better Blues is a cool movie. I mean, it's not really the greatest. It's not really one of his best films. But it's kind of his first forte in, like, a big budget kind of thing. And it's immediately following after Do the Right Thing. It has its own thing. It has its own like kind of life, and it has its own kind of like energy and soul to it. But it's not really one of his highly regarded films. But Denzel is an important part of it. Jungle Fever is kind of the same thing as another idea of sexual liberation. Kind of addresses the idea of race with the white man, the black girl, the black woman. How that kind of interplay happens. But the main thing we want to get to is Malcolm X, I think, because Malcolm X is kind of seen, whereas a lot of people consider Do the Right Thing to be his best film. A lot of people consider Malcolm X to be like his magnum opus, like his big budget, like his statement to the world. 3 hours, I think 3 hours and 12 minutes, something like that, of just pure diving into the life of Malcolm Little. As you could kind of break this movie up into 3 separate sections, really. The whole opening section with his life of crime, like with the Zook suits and the crazy music. The second portion being his time in prison and how that influenced him as learning more about and educating himself more on the stuff pertaining to converting to Islam and becoming a Muslim, but also becoming very radical and extreme, and then moving over into like the later part of his life, with his pilgrimage to Mecca and coming back and having kind of a new sense and approach to the way he approaches civil rights. But it's just interesting how prominent, he had like a very, the actual person of Malcolm X had very like troubled story life. But I think Spike Lee kind of encapsulates all of that as much as possible and interweaves that into a lot of different moments into this movie, and it just works. To me, this is probably this is my second favorite Spike Lee. And of course, wearing the Malcolm X hat. Oh, it's my favorite hat of all time, signed by Spike Lee himself.
Oh, why don't you get him to sign it?
Oh, I didn't get him to sign it himself. He had like a song on his website, so
got it.
Yeah. This is probably my favorite hat. I actually went on JT's girlfriend's show. You know how she does all like favorite prize collections. And,
this was your object.
Yeah, that's my object. Yeah. So
that's something that's actually cool and important. I brought my N64.
Really? Yeah. I love this hat though, man, and has a real kind of low key. It costs a
lot of money.
Yeah. The shipping, you have to pay for shipping. Low key took like three weeks to get here, but hey, I ain't gonna fault the man. Spike Lee, if you listening. It's my favorite hat. I'm a hat guy, so I love wearing it.
I like how you give a shout out to every director, assuming that he's listening to the show.
Hey, maybe, man.
We can't get 15-year-olds to listen to it, and then we're gonna get the directors to listen to it.
Hey, tweet this at Spike Lee, man. Tell him. Instagram him, everything, man.
Obviously, what stands out in this movie as well is like you said about Spike Lee, but also you could say the same thing about Denzel. Kind of his acting showcase.
I'd say this is probably one of the top 5 motion picture performances of all time. For me personally.
Oh, not just for Denzel. For
any actor.
Okay.
Anything.
Wow.
And I mean, this just shows, man. I mean, like he embraces the power, the sensitivity of Malcolm X, the anger, but also, bringing a humanistic approach to it.
and the change between how he was before.
Like I said, it's like he's
becomes.
playing 3 different characters all in one film, but he brings the consistency and I don't know. To me, this is one of the greatest performances I think of all time.
Yeah. Obviously, this is based on the story of Malcolm X, and
the autobiography of Malcolm
X,
yeah.
and his life and what he went through and how he developed his ideals and the history of the man who was Malcolm X. Now, for me, obviously, what stands out the most to me is the defining the man, defining who he was, and defining the way he viewed the civil rights movement and the movement that he was a part of. Because during that time, there was several other leaders, obviously, including the great Martin Luther King, but Malcolm X had an interesting background because he had a background that. You know what stands out the most to me, and obviously this is more your thing than it is my thing, but it's the fact that he was light skinned. Like he was real light skinned, because his mom was half.
Yeah, his mom was raped by a white man, so she had the kid. So like his mom is super light, and then they even say in the movie his mom went after somebody super dark because she wanted the kid, her son or her child, to have represent more of what she's about. Yeah, so it's interesting.
But it's also the thing of how there was this like weird. Obviously, he takes it to an extreme as far as 2 levels go, but there was this weird kind of like submission towards white people during that time, as far as especially even in the first scene of this movie, or one of the first scenes in the movie, with the hair product,
right, exactly,
and almost kind of bending yourself to the white.
Whiteness. What people the definition of beauty with
correct.
I was literally just going to mention that how he was going out of his way to make himself assimilate more to American
and even dating the white girls and obviously he had Sophia who he dated for. I know, man. Sophia's crazy.
That's crazy.
But it's like the whitest girl ever. Yeah, it's not even like a kind of white. No, she's white.
It's just. That scene when he's walking, when he's about to walk old girl back, the black girl, and then Sophia's like, oh, walk her back, it'll be waiting. Like what? That's crazy. But no, that's a little wild. But it's funny because early on in his life, he was very, his parents had a lot of pushback towards white. So I guess, when you get older, you kind of want to assimilate more towards be rebellious or whatever. But he had a big life of crime. That was his thing. Like, I think even fucking Quincy Jones said in like his last interview that like Malcolm X like sold him drugs or whatever. It's probably true. But I don't know why he had to say that. But yeah, he did used to have like a story life of crime
in his previous life.
In his previous life, yeah, when he was much younger. Part of the reason he was able to get away with that is because he was lighter skinned, because he had like the slick hair, because he wore like the Zook suits with Spike Lee. Shorty. Yeah. Those scenes are so funny to me, man. When they're like walking down the street, they're like doing like that's funny to me, man. But
that was that time, man. That was that era.
Once your arms get tired, if you just kept walking like this the whole time,
you're dancing everywhere you go. It's like, bro, don't you get tired of like being happy and dancing? Damn. But yeah, that was obviously something that is a part of his life because he remembers that, and the fact that when he goes to prison and he meets what's his face.
Oh, I can't remember.
I don't know his name, but he teaches him the very much. It's obviously Islam and it's obviously Muslim, but it's very much a black perspective, a black Muslim kind of thing, by Elijah Muhammad. Kind of that new wave of Islamic movement towards the black community.
Farrakhan was like advocating for later, like after Malcolm X, obviously, but it's definitely like a pro-black, and a lot of times people see Islam being being something that is more accepting towards, because what happens in America is that people keep using Bible and throwing like the Bible as like a way to justify racism. right? And the way to keep African Americans down. But Islam is still seen as more of like a more approach that's more liberating towards the African American population. There's even that scene early on when he goes to his childhood and the teacher's like talking to him like, you should be a carpenter. Jesus was a carpenter. Like, what? Like, what kind of logic does that? So, but that's the kind of racist ideology they use. But meanwhile, when there's a black preacher who's Malcolm's father, they terrorize him and they harass him. They burn his house down. Again, there's so many great lines in this movie, man. When the father is like about to shoot the Klansman, he's like, "You're gonna take these bullets for these sheets." And
wait, what does he say?
When he's like, when the Klansmen are burning down his house and he sees him come outside, he's like, you cowards are gonna hide under your sheets. And he pulls out his gun. He's like, take these bullets. He says, take these bullets for these sheets, and then like starts shooting at him and like drive away. I don't know why that was so funny to me, man. But that's why there's such a chip on his shoulder later on in his career, later on in his life, well, I shouldn't say his career, his life, when he starts discovering like the injustices that he's experienced throughout his entire life, and how that ties back to, frankly, the systematic issues that America has always implemented onto the black population. So this movie just is incredible.
It's a very much more, especially coming out of prison, he had a very much more aggressive approach.
Yeah.
A very much more fire and brimstone type of messages that he would preach as far as on the pro-black movement and on the civil rights movement and on the movement of black empowerment type of thing.
Right. And especially when you see him walking around the streets and see like all of the disenfranchised people. There's that moment where he's walking and there's that I don't know exactly how to describe it, but it's so visually beautiful when he's like walking down the street and he and the camera like stops as it's like it's on in the hallway and it fades to like a prostitute like doing her business. It's just like there's so like that's literally what it all comes down to a lot of times, is like how black people have been just kept down and held down for so long, and he's seen that throughout his entire life. Even when he visits the homie who's really mentally disabled and he has to take care of him. There's so many scenes where you see how beat down black people were at this time and just in general, and how that kind of fuels the anger within. And Denzel sells that so well. And that scene where he has to, when he starts like his first big movement where he tries to get the brother out of prison, and he organizes everybody to like march over to the police station, and it's like almost like retaliating back using like the militarized like approach that the police use, kind of fighting that back using black people and organizing them and getting them to point that in the other direction, and how scary that is for those police officers. So
absolutely,
yeah, just so many
showing organization,
right?
Showing choreography, almost a choreography to the movements, making it seem like a much more organized, focused movement instead of just sporadic kind of random attacks or random reactions. It's much more a direct approach in dealing with racism.
Right. And I think that's, it's interesting we bring up how social movements, particularly with Malcolm X, nowadays kind of the modern civil rights movement is, of course, like the Black Lives Matter thing, which doesn't have a leader necessarily. And a lot of people see it as a good thing, because it's not like with Malcolm X or Martin Luther King, you can assassinate a leader and the movement just goes away, or the Black Panthers too. It's not like it's not seen as something where you can murder his leader and then it'll just phase away or whatever. With Black Lives Matter, it was more of a universal thing. Everybody could socially advocate for that. Now, of course, there is the downside of maybe having a leaderless organization like Black Lives Matter, or outside of like civil rights, more to like humanistic rights or equality with the Women's March, another organization that doesn't necessarily have a leader, but they fight for so many different topics and issues that it's not really clear what the fight is about. And Malcolm X had a very direct point of instituting self-defense, being defensive of your culture, and not being defensive, not self-defense in the physical, not only in a physical way, in a physical way as well, but in an emotional way, holding close to your culture, holding close. And I think that's influenced, when he went to Mecca and comes back and he sees the way people are proud of their culture in other countries. And I even remember, we talked about last week with Ryan Coogler, how he had that Hot 97 interview. When he talks, he talked about going back to Africa and seeing how like African people are so proud of loving watermelon and having their barbecues and keeping their hair natural. But when we come to America, because we're the minority and because it's so beaten us, the traditional standards that we have to live by, you stop becoming proud of the things you should be proud of in your culture. I just think that's something that Malcolm was defending. Like, be defensive of yourself, be defensive of your culture, and be defensive of the people trying to push against you, the government, like the institutions, the police. Just be defensive of all that. And I think that's awesome that Spike incorporates all that, particularly in using. Obviously this movie takes place in like 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. But the opening sequence is literally that speech, the big Malcolm X speech, calling, white people the biggest murderers, the biggest kidnappers, all that, over the footage of the Rodney King beatings that happened like literally that same year, if I'm not mistaken. So powerful stuff, man. Really powerful stuff with the iconography of the American flag and using the American music, kind of like we're going to talk about more with he got game, but like using the like the Aaron Copland Expire, like big American Western kind of music is a big part of that too.
One thing that stands out for me as far as the man Malcolm X and who he was, and kind of relating that to someone like a Martin Luther King, the thing that stands out is the fact that they're just natural talented speakers. Mm-hmm. Like at the end of the day, at the end of all of it, if you hear back Martin Luther King's speeches, they're basically poems. Mm-hmm. They're insane. They're basically songs. Mm-hmm. As far as how they're said, how they're done, the cadence, the speech patterns, the analogies, the similes, the metaphors, everything that incorporates into his speaking. And kind of taking it back to Malcolm X, where Malcolm X had a much more of a intellectual approach, a much more
more direct,
more political, more I would say more academic in a sense than a Martin Luther King, who was a much more poetic, a much more open-minded, a much more rainbows and fields of God and that kind of stuff. And Malcolm X, which was a much more kind of like intellectual, historical kind of manner of speaking. But they were both incredible speakers, to the point like at the end of the day, that's just natural talent. It just comes to you, where it's like the reason why he succeeded so much after getting out of jail was because he was just a natural speaker. Like, he's just so really good at speaking. But one thing I really do want to say, and this is something personal for me, as far as talking about someone like a Malcolm X, who's regarded as one of the most influential Black people of all time, and one of the leaders of the civil rights movement, and of the what the Black community considers to be one of their greatest. Right, I mean, it's Malcolm X, man. I mean, they consider him to be one of the greatest leaders of all time, as well as Martin Luther King. Think about it. And I know I'm gonna step on people's toes here, but think about it. A Muslim guy, super Muslim minister, and a preacher, a Christian Baptist preacher, and a Muslim minister.
Yeah,
it's two faiths and two. You can call them religions if you want, but if you would ask Martin Luther King and if you would ask Malcolm X, they would call them faith. Mm-hmm. And the way they cling to their faith and the way they use their faith to the opposite effect of what people are using their faith now for, if that makes sense.
Right.
How the two biggest Black leaders of all time were two of the most faithful, religious dudes you will ever meet. And that's Martin Luther King and that's Malcolm X. They are so strung up and so focused on their faith, and they cling to their faith as a way to justify the movement of the Black people. The fact that those other people can use their faith, whether it be a Muslim or anything else, or a Christian, and use the faith as a way to oppress the Black people. To me, that's the thing that stands out the most to me, right, is the fact that people nowadays look at Christianity, look at religiousness, look at Islam and look at all these faiths and see them as something that's so negative and so evil and so putting us down, oppressing us. And the two people that freaking did the most work were two of the most religious people of all time.
Right.
Like, that to me is like, we need to stop looking at faith and looking at people's perspective on God, right? Because there's still two faiths, Muslim and in Christianity, that are both so different, and yet they both believe in God. And start looking at what makes us human and what makes us together in those movements, right? I don't know. This is me on a personal level that I'm speaking from, because to me, I found so much aggression, so much negativity towards religion and towards faith, for good reason, because a lot of people use it for negativity. Right. But the fact that these two men, who are the two biggest black leaders of all time, in America, were the two most religious dudes of all time. Like, it's so crazy how a Muslim and a Christian did so much, and they are using their faith to take it to the white people, in a sense, right? And the fact that the white people of this time who were Christian probably weren't accepting of this. At least a lot of them were, right? I mean, I don't know what you think about that, but to me that stands out a lot.
Right.
He's Muslim. I mean, he's super Muslim, dude. Right.
I mean, he's proud of what he represents, and he's proud of what he is and what he's his being and everything. I definitely think that he, you're right. They religion ultimately is like just saying be a good person. I think at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, if you look at the Christian faith in general, it isn't about divisions. It isn't about superiority. It's the opposite of that. Yeah. It's the opposite effect of that. And when people use that to preach that kind of negativity, it frustrates me, because it paints a faith in general in a box. And even in the Islamic community, because, dude, if you really think about it, like, there's a lot of controversy on this, and I listen to a lot of political podcasts and stuff that talk about this. But the conservative Islamic movement is a movement that's killing people, literally killing people right now in the Middle East, using the Islamic faith as a way to justify the murder of women and children and homosexuals and whatever you want to call them. They murder what they consider to be against Allah. And yet there is this other side of the Islamic movement that wants to uplift and bring together and help other people. And it's so many varying degrees that I really do feel like it's a dangerous perspective to paint religion in one sense. And don't get me wrong, religion has done a lot of bad in this world, But in the sense of the faith in general of what God is supposed to represent to the vast majority of these people, whether it be Islamic or Christian, is positivity, is unity, and it's peace.
Yeah, no, and I think using the how similar they are, but how how kind of almost a little bit contrasting they are too is kind of the beauty and like the nuance of understanding the argument towards civil rights. I mean, that's the whole question, to do the right thing at the end, where they have the two like kind of competing. They have the two competing like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X quotes. But at the end of the day, doing the right thing is not like, believing in whatever, or it's just being a good person, and it's just fighting for the people who are underprivileged and people who deserve the same opportunities as anybody else. So.
Yeah. So if you disagree with me, I'm
no. I mean, no, I don't disagree. It seems like
you're like, man, I hate this guy right now.
No. I mean, I get what you're saying. No,
all I'm saying is that it doesn't matter what background, what faith you are, as long as you're a human being, a person, fighting for that is the most important thing, I think. Yeah. I think we could all agree on that.
Yeah, right? Definitely.
And it's one of those things where I do feel like so many people are taken aback by certain people's beliefs and faiths instead of realizing what they truly believe in, I think is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Because there's living in LA and then living in Phoenix and then living in other areas that come from all Christian, no Christian, yes Christian, anti-Christian, or anti-faith or anti-religion, or yes to religion, or yes to Islamic religion, but not yes to the Christian religion, or perspectives of the faith, right? Where it comes to conservatism or liberalism. Right? Because there's liberalism in Christianity and Islamic, and there's conservatism in both, right? But kind of realizing the encapsulating atmosphere and the encapsulating message of both faiths should be, peace and unity and good.
Yeah.
I mean, the most basic stuff in humankind.
Right.
And yet it's caused so much war and so much hate. on both sides. I mean, specifically within the black community. I mean, I'm not mistaken when I say that.
Yeah.
How many people in the black community have used their faith or grown up in faith in the church, whether it be the Christian church or even the Islamic church, because there's a lot of black Muslims.
Yeah.
But that's an important part of the African American community.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, definitely. And I think that's, faith is what kind of carries African Americans through a lot of the but more trying times in American history, through slavery, through the civil rights movement, through everything. I mean, that's what helps. That's what gives us an understanding and a guide. And I think that people interpret religion differently, but at the end of the day, like I said, at the end of the day, it's all the same stuff. It's all. I
feel
and I don't think there's no need to I don't think there's a need for people to like trivialize religion and like try and say it's like you said, it's not a bad thing. It's the way people use religion is what
it is, and it's. I think it's become so politicized to the point that I don't. I was thinking about it this weekend and this morning, specifically. I mean, even on a Sunday too, right? Where you think about church and you think about faith and you think about your own personal walk. I guess if you want to call that, how we live in a country that has politicized faith so extreme that it's not any personal walk anymore. It's almost one sort of definition, whether it's like, if I'm a Christian, I'm on the right. If I'm not a Christian, I'm on the left. But what if I'm a Christian but I'm black and I feel like the right is oppressing me? Then where am I? Am I on the left or am I on the right? I'm on the right. What if I'm a Latino guy and I'm pro Latino and I'm pro family and I'm pro-Christian, and I'm a Christian, Latino, and or Catholic, or whatever you want to call it, but I'm also pro-family, and I don't want my family to be separated from me, and I feel like the right is purposely out to separate my family from me by not letting me have interactions between the borders or across the borders, or I've grown up here my whole life, but somehow they want to oppress me and keep me out of this country because I didn't grow up here, and yet I'm a Christian, and they say they're a Christian, but they're anti-family, but they're pro-Christian. You see what I'm saying? There's so many different muddling of this faith that I it gets me upset, because I feel like the right has used it as a weapon to say, this is what you have to believe if you're a Christian. You must be on the right. You must be on the Republican side or this side. But what if I'm what if I'm a Christian and I follow those things you say, and you still choose to oppress me because I'm Latin, or because I'm Latino, because I'm black, because I'm Asian? There's so many different varying effects that I feel like it's a dangerous thing to start to use that and weaponize it in a way to divide people. And that's what's happened so much in this country that upsets me. I guess you can tell by the tone of my voice.
Right. No, I feel you on that, man. No, definitely. Yeah.
That's all I gotta say.
All right, cool. I'm
done.
No. I mean, you preaching positivity, man. I appreciate it, dog.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice stuff.
Yeah, because I'm just saying, man. Like, I was thinking about that. Like, what if I am the person who follows faith but doesn't believe in what you believe in and believes in family, and you say you believe in family but you want to separate my family? Then why would I believe in your political ideology, almost to the point where your political party has become more important than God himself? And isn't God supposed to be the most important thing of your life if you follow faith, whether you're a Muslim or a Christian?
Right.
I don't know. I'm gonna stop.
No. I mean, I so get what you're saying. No, I think that's crucial, and I think particularly going into like the law and punishment of like different religions and just different people in general. I mean, Malcolm X kind of addresses that in a way, like particularly in the incarceration aspect, right? Like how people of color are locked up and they're forced to like stay within, kind of locked up behind cages, and that's the only means they're able to like embrace their own religion, because that's all they have left is faith, right? But I mean, the anxiety of incarceration is something that like carries through in like a lot of Spike Lee's films, at least. That's in his later films, Clockers, and of course he got Game, and
talk to me about
Old
those
Boy
two.
too.
Clockers
and Kirkland. Yeah. So those. So Clockers is like a crime drama, is more of a straight up crime drama, and Spike has a whole legacy of crime dramas too, with Inside Man, I think, being his biggest one. We're going to talk
That's
about
right.
Inside Man more
Yeah.
too. But Clockers is more of a thing about about a dude who got caught up in the drug game, and the guy Harvey Keitel, I think, is the main investigator in that. Yeah, it's a really trippy movie, man. I mean, I appreciate it for what he has to say about different types of crime and what like level and like varying degree of crime and how we come to interpret criminals and whatnot. His film before that, though, Kirkland, is more of like a personal film for him. That one is like more of just portraying like his family relationship really on screen, is more of like an autobiography kind of thing. But the main thing, and of course he has documentaries in between. Four Little Girls, I think we could talk about a little later, but He Got Game is definitely the one that's like the movie about prison, right? It's also the movie about basketball, and that's something that Spike Lee cares about a lot too. In Do the Right Thing, there's that scene where the guy wearing the Larry Bird jersey comes into the neighborhood and he rocks over bugging out Jordans. It's the whole rivalry between Jordan versus Bird or whatever. It's kind of a funny way of interpolating that, but like that's how passionate Spike has always been about sports. And like I say, he directed a lot of Jordan commercials in the 90s and the 2000s. And he's a very big basketball guy.
And it's crazy how the basketball culture is also a conversation on race in general, and how that's translated till today as well.
Right.
I mean, look at even just last week with the whole LeBron thing and the whole Fox News versus LeBron. I mean, it's always been the athleticism and the sports community has always had a conversation on race, and has always had an open conversation on race, and how Spike Lee has even before that became huge during this time, making a movie like He Got Game and having a conversation about a Larry Bird versus a Jordan kind of thing. Whether it's the crazy good basketball white guy who's just like kicking ass versus the black guy that a lot of people overlook.
Right. And I think Spike even
during this time specifically, right? Because Larry Bird in a way was kind of bigger in the sense of popularity, because he was white.
Well, it was more I guess accessible. But I think Spike really has a big problem with the NCAA. He's been speaking out against the National College of Athletics Association for a long time, justifiably so, because these players are going to college. Universities are making tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars in some cases off of these players. They're just going to throw them a couple scholarship here or there, and that's how they justify doing that. But the players aren't getting paid; they're being mistreated, and low key. I mean, that's kind of what He Got Game is all about too. Is like how kind of rigged and stupid the NCAA system of recruiting players is. I know recently that there's, he was also, and I forgot to mention, Spike Lee was, he didn't direct Hoop Dreams, but he was part of it. He was in the documentary, and he was talking to college students about how jacked up the NCAA system is. So that's something he cared about for a very long time. But I even remember there's that whole controversy recently, which is why I think Penn State or whatever,
or Louisville,
or one of them is disqualified from compete, or got their stuff stripped away because they hire like strippers and like
that was Louisville,
Louisville.
Rick Pitino retired and everything.
Yeah. Spike Lee literally put this on screen 20 years ago, and like nobody, I guess everybody was like, oh, I guess, but I guess that's how he just making it up. No, he wasn't making it up. He knows what it is. And he was putting that on screen, and I guess nobody heard him back in 1998 when this movie came out. But it's the way that people it's the way the NCAA manipulates players, and it's also the way they manipulate relationships with people. That's what this whole movie, He Got Game, is all about. It's about the kid Jesus Shuttleworth. Again, another commentary on religion. Jesus Shuttleworth being the best high school basketball player in the country, being recruited by every school in the world. But the governor personally takes his father, Jesus' father, who was in prison. for murdering his mother, releases him for a week to try and convince Jesus, who's played by Ray Allen, to convince him to join play for Big State for the state school, and it's and that's not a made up thing. Like they're not made. That's the kind of extent that the people are willing to go for, like, home pride, for making money. Really, at the end of the day, it's about the making money aspect of it, and how these college players are kind of manipulated and brought into that. But I think this movie is like of course, it's over the top with his basketball, and it uses it's very easily like the big commentary on the American culture and American dream overall. And like I said, he used, like, this movie has no composer, doesn't have any original score. What he uses, like, old Aaron Copland compositions directly implemented to him, giving you that sense of, like, Americana, that sense of big sweeping American kind of themes and feels and whatnot. But this movie, it's also very nuanced in this approach to how can you reconcile a relationship that's broken by, like a father played by Denzel Washington and a son played by Ray Allen, who before Denzel's character was locked up, he was very abusive in training his son how to be a player, keeping up late at night doing like those runs and those practices. But then also, on top of that, being somebody who murdered his mother. It wasn't intentional, but father comes home, angry that his son was mad at the dad for throwing the ball over the court. They get into an argument, pushes his mother into the in the kitchen and kills her. And this, it's an accident, but of course, that's your mom's. You know what I mean? So how are you able to forgive somebody for doing that to you? And then at the end, even in the end, I mean, it's a complicated movie, man. It's tough, and I think it deals with the themes of fatherhood that we always talk about when we talk about cinema, and particularly with Black cinema as well. It deals with, like I said, the NCAA stuff, the pressures that are applied by everybody around you. There's a great montage in this, and by the way, we didn't go mentioning the use of montage in Spike Lee's movies yet, but montage is such a big part of his films. Like we said and Do the Right Thing, where he goes to all the different characters. But in this movie, there's that great montage of where I believe the homie, one of Jesus's, like, Shady's friends, I can't remember who he is, who he's played by, but he's kind of telling him all of the different, like, tribulations that's going to come with basketball, right? The sex, the money, the drugs, the drinking, like all that kind of stuff. It's just and portrayed in, like, a visual way is just really impactful. But yeah, no, this is actually one of my my third personal favorite Spike Lee movie. He Got Game, and because it addresses, like, so many deep themes and so many bigger, broader concepts.
And awesome. If you're a fan of basketball too, it's
basketball,
cool.
Yeah, that's the biggest.
Because I love basketball. And
yeah,
it's crazy how it's Spike Lee loves basketball too, like you said before.
This is the best. This is probably the best shot basketball movie, like in terms of the basketball sequences. Probably the best we got out there. But and it's all about incarceration, man. And I think carrying over from Malcolm X and how being locked up is such a trial on somebody, how it's so hurtful for somebody like Jake, who's the dad played by Denzel, how him getting out for the first time, and even when he's out, he's still not really allotted freedom. They just kind of throw him in a motel and expect him to live there with no food, no money, so he's kind of like just barely getting by. Meanwhile, his son's living like the big life, being taken to different colleges, having prostitutes thrown in his face, and cars and money, and how even that real estate dude, I forget who plays the real estate, the agent guy in this movie, how the real estate, I keep saying real estate. Why I keep saying real estate? I'm looking at your TV. There's like the New York skyline with like a bunch of buildings. I'm like, oh, real estate, but never mind. Agents, how like the agents are using like cars and money to try and persuade, and he talks to him like saying like, don't what's the point of going to college? You can just go straight to the NBA. And we'll take care of you. And it's like, no, his mom specifically wanted him to get a full education before going into the college, before going to the league, because what else would he have to fall back on? And that's another big problem with the basketball system as well.
It's like a super. I mean, we're seeing it now too with the crazy NCAA things that are going down right now. Because it's a crazy corrupt system. I mean, this stuff isn't new, man. This stuff's been going on forever.
It's not new. I mean, and Spike, even when that Louisville news broke, Spike put out the perfect tweet. He was like, he got game in 1998, and you motherfuckers haven't said shit for 15 years. You know, like that's what it comes down to. Like, and I guess I don't know. I guess people don't really. Guess people never really, put the puzzle together. And
that's basketball too. I mean, I follow college football like crazy. College football. That's another one that's super crazy and corrupt. The NCAA in general, it just is a weird backwards system.
You can't pay the players. I mean, that's the biggest thing to me is like a lot of these basketball players. If you really talk to them, they are broke. They are broke. They seem like mega stars. Everyone wants to take selfies with them. They can barely afford meals. You know, like I said, the colleges are making tens of millions of dollars off of selling their jerseys, the stadium seats, TV rights, like all that stuff, man. It's like, man, where the money, the players are seeing none of that money. They're just being used as tools, as pawns in the overall bigger system, and it's just really upsetting and hurtful, I think. But yeah, no, we didn't talk about Four Little Girls.
I was gonna say after he got game, he has a ton of documentaries and documentary shorts. What do you think about Four Little Girls as a documentary?
Right. Well, that was his another film he was nominated for the Oscar for. It came out, I think, the year before he got game, but
because he does a lot of docs, man.
Yeah, he does a lot of documentaries. He does a lot of music videos. He's done regular documentaries too. He has a lot of documentaries that he's involved in, and a lot of times about the appreciation of film, but there's also a lot of social issues as well. But this is kind of his big like social issues movie. It's about the 4 girls that were killed in the bombing in Birmingham, Alabama, back in 1980. Oh man, I don't want to get the year wrong, so I don't even want to say it, but yeah, it's about that whole event, and you see that happen at the very opening sequence of Selma.
It's definitely not the 80s.
No, I didn't say 80s. I say 60s.
60s.
I don't know exactly what year in the 60s. But yeah, it's about that.
You see the crazy shot in Selma.
Yeah. That's what it's about. And this movie was nominated for Best Documentary when it came out. It's an HBO. HBO backed it, and it's another movie. This one has more of a. Since with Martin Luther King being more active in the fight for in Birmingham and all that stuff, you see a lot of Martin Luther King presence in this movie too. So as opposed to him making Malcolm X, now he has more of a Martin Luther King kind of perspective on implemented in this film. But it's also a very tragic story, man. There's so many scenes where they interview family members of those little girls killed and how they kind of describe what they're doing that day. Like, you know, one of them, I think it was like the sister of the girl at the time. It's the sister of the girl. Talking about how that day her mom was telling her that the lace on her dress was loose, and she said something to the effect of like, you know, if you always want to go out looking your best because you never know what's going to happen that day, and that was the last time she saw her daughter. Before, you know, being bombed. And the bombings, the KKK, the Klans were active, you know, at this time. This is their big thing, and they're bombing people, firebombing people, and they just decide to blow up this church and, you know, taking it to a whole nother level. It's just really sad and really heartbreaking, but...
It really is, especially the fact that it's children, especially the fact that it's a hate crime, especially the fact that it's a terrorist crime, and especially the fact that this isn't something that's too unheard of nowadays. Well, how many years ago was it in that church shooting?
It was like
4 years ago?
2013, I think.
2013.
14, one of them. Yeah, with Dylan Roof. And,
I mean, that was a church shooting inside
that was Charleston, South Carolina, right?
I think so, but it was a black church, right?
Yeah, black church. Yeah.
And he just went and shot it up.
Yeah.
I mean, that's so intense, and that itself is a terrorist crime too. I mean, the fact that this stuff is so ingrained in hyper racism and hyper destruction and terrorism. Frankly, and domestic terrorism, because so much of this nation is focused on terrorism from people that are not from this country, and we ignore all the terrorism that has happened within the country that is done by the hands of people who are not immigrants and who are not from a different faith, but who claim to be from your faith and who are white.
Right.
And they're extremists.
Right.
And we just saw that with the shooting in Parkland.
Yeah.
That was what 2 weeks ago already now, and it's like it's insane. It's just insane. But obviously, this one is a different case because it's purely racism. Purely racist hate crime. And it's just awful, man. It really is. I mean, even that scene in the movie, Selma, is awful to see. And when you hear the history of it, it's hard not to break down because you really do feel the devastation of destroying little girls and destroying
four potential lives, four families that are impacted by it.
And every time I see that, I think of four futures too, right? Because it's futures that you're neglecting. Right. It's impacts that you won't see now that you might see later on, but you're taking the impacts away because they're not being able to live out the rest of their life because it's cut so short. That's devastating, man. Yeah, and I'm glad Spike Lee was able to do something like that got attention.
Yeah, and of course, like we said, documentaries. He's done a lot. He has a long relationship with doing like a lot of stuff for HBO. He even did he even does like a lot of stand-up comedy specials now too. With HBO, a lot of sports documentaries. Kind of tying back to He Got Game. He did that documentary for ESPN. What was it? Kobe Doing Work. One of my personal favorite documentaries. I remember as a kid. Yeah. You're not a Kobe fan.
I'm not.
But that documentary is actually amazing. It's about like the one day and like Kobe playing like the San Antonio Spurs, and it's to qualify for. It's to see where they land on the rankings for. Before they go into the playoffs, and Kobe drops like 60. Spike had 12 cameras randomly placed throughout the audience. Great documentary. But yeah, no, and he, like I said, he even, to me personally, I mean, a lot of people, nobody talks about this, but also Spike did Mike Tyson's one-man show that was on HBO as well, which is actually like a really insightful and brilliant kind of special that goes into like the life and the troubles of like Mike Tyson too. But he has a lot of documentaries, like in Bad 25, obviously Michael Jackson. He has a long relationship with his fandom of Michael Jackson too. Made a lot of documentaries for him, did a lot of music videos for him, and ultimately, made Bad 25, which is a documentary that came out right after he died. But he was also featured in This Is It too, the big studio released one. But then Bad 25 was another one that aired on ABC, and it was a pretty cultural landstone. So, but kind of moving on towards, I guess we're going to
modern times.
Modern times, the 2000s Spike. Now, let's make modern times just because we're running short on time. Let's kind of group it all together. Modern Spike Lee, which is not as well regarded. Yeah, a lot of people say he kind of fell off, but
he fell off. Yeah,
I think you can't have this conversation. I mean, obviously, when you talk about Bamboozle being the first movie of the 2000s, which a lot of people hate, it's about a TV dude who puts on blackface, and it's really stupid. But 25th Hour, I will contend, is one of his best motion pictures, starring Edward Norton. And a lot of Ellen Page. No, not Ellen. Who's
Anna Paquin.
Anna Paquin. Yeah. She's in this. Philip Seymour Hoffman's in this. I mean, the cast is stacked. And to me, this is one of my favorite Spike Lee movies. This was shot right after 9/11. The first movie to be shot in New York after 9/11, which is, huge. And then directly, and what it is about, it's about a guy who is arrested for selling a bunch of coke. Rosario Dawson's in it as well. Plays his girlfriend, Edward Norton's girlfriend. But Edward Norton's character, he is found guilty of selling a bunch of drugs, a bunch of narcotics, and he's about to be locked away for a very long time. So it's like the 25th hour, the day before that happens, before he has to go to prison and serve his time. And it's just, man, I mean, this movie is one of the most nuanced Spike Lee movies, man. I mean, it's still very stylized. It's still very over the top as some people would consider Spike Lee to be, but it's a lot to do with the incarceration, as we talked about before, with Malcolm X and with and
He got game.
Yeah, he got game. But it's also very, very impactful in the sense of talking about post 9/11 New York. You know, how people's ideologies started getting changed after that. It is kind of summed up perfectly in that big like "fuck you" montage. That's one of the, again, another use of montage in a Spike Lee movie. I consider one of the best montages of all time. Top 2 or 3. If you haven't seen it, you go on YouTube and type in "fuck you" montage for 25th Hour, and it basically goes through like he's interpolating all of the different types of hatred and that he feels in New York, but just in period. You know, it's like the Russians, all different types of races he kind of addresses, and it kind of really sums up how the consciousness of New York was at that time. And there's even a scene where Philip Seymour Hoffman and another supporting character in this movie, I can't remember exactly who that supporting actor is, but they have that scene where they're talking over Ground Zero, like because the homie's apartment is like right. Oh, let me get his name. Barry Pepper. Barry Pepper's character, his apartment is right next to Ground Zero. So they're having a whole conversation of like, "Are you okay to live here? Like, I thought they said you can't live right next to it." And they have this whole conversation, but like the subtext, and you see the Ground Zero as they're talking, like the camera's overhead. Great shot, and there's great visual storytelling because it emphasizes the text that they're actually talking about, but the subtext and what they're talking about is like, can we move past this? They're having a whole conversation of how is Monty is his name, the main Edward Norton character, how he's going to live a life in prison, post prison, and how Barry's character Frank, he's saying like, there's no way he's going to survive in there. There's no way, like, he's just going to, this is the last time we're ever going to see him. And then Philip Seymour Hoffman's still trying to embody like this feeling of hope. And there's just so many different themes. It also kind of deals with the theme of Philip Seymour Hoffman character kind of wanting to date a high school girl, which is kind of creepy. There's so much in this movie, man. And I think this is one of Spike Lee's like finest movies, and addressing the post 9/11 New York, addressing the fear of incarceration, even all the way to the end when his dad is driving him to the prison, and they have that whole conversation of another use of montage when what life would be like if they just took the wrong road and escaped, and how he could start piecing and puzzling his life together. Another great sequence. I think, by the way, La La Land ripped off the ending of 25th Hour. La La Land ripped off the ending.
And you
of
love the
Hour.
ending to La La Land.
I love La La Land, but 25th Hour, exact same ending, the exact same ending, and but it's a lot more. It's very Spike Lee-ish, but it's awesome. So check out 25th Hour. Fuck you montage, ending, the Ground Zero scene. A lot of great scenes in this movie. I think that's definitely worth trying. And it's interesting comparing this Edward Norton to the Edward Norton in American History X. That's very like hardcore racist, like, a neo-Nazi kind of, and having this redemption arc. And in this movie, he thinks that his girlfriend, played by Rosario Dawson, is the one who sold him up the river. And it's interesting seeing like the compare and contrast and like the characters and the racial dynamics that they have in this. Another 2000s movie, of course, is Inside Man, which is a straight up crime thriller, starring Denzel, starring Clive Owen, starring Jodie Foster, Chiwetel Ejiofor plays like Denzel's like also assistant. Have you seen this one? Or
Willem Dafoe.
Willem Dafoe. It's so many. That's probably the most stacked cast he's ever had. Probably the biggest budget. Max von Sydow was in it, and it's a pure crime drama, crime heist. Bank robbery movie, but it's done with such style and such like cool and interesting. He even puts a little flavor of noir in there too. It's just nice seeing how this movie played out.
Another great Denzel performance too.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
Denzel stands out in everything he does, but this was another standout. This was a time where Denzel was doing kind of a lot of crime.
Yeah,
This was like the 2000s Denzel when he was doing all those crime movies.
Yeah.
So,
The Training Day. Man, he had a good one. And there's also like just a lot of heist movies in general. I think,
What other heist movies? There was like Training Day, Man of Fire. Deja Vu.
These are all like the Denzel crime. Kind of things. But yeah, no.
American Gangster, was that Denzel too?
Yeah, that's Denzel. Yeah, Ridley Scott directed that one.
It's all like these
gangsters.
Denzel.
But this one he's playing.
Denzel was doing all this work, man.
Yeah, but this one he's playing a cop, and which is a nice compare and contrast. A difference is, again, this is the importance of having like black representation. This is a movie where the black man is the lead detective and is outsmarting and trying to keep up with everybody, but the robbers are white or European to say, and Clive Owen is the main. But what's also interesting too is that you follow the main story as it's happening, as the actual heist is happening, but it also flashes back to flashes forward to when they're trying to interview people, trying to figure out who actually did it, because in the end the robbers get away. And like they and it's just awesome seeing like that, like kind of like cat and mouse, but they never really catching each other. And it's just it was all the way nice. And then and again, this is another post 9/11 thing when they have that whole footage. There's that whole sequence where they like fake kill somebody to throw the police off their scent, or not to throw the police off their scent. They to heighten their negotiation thing and warrant like their demands, as you know, or whatever. It's very reminiscent of like those like 2000s like those like videos that are coming out of Al Qaeda and stuff,
the Middle East,
the terrorist killings and stuff. Yeah. It was very invocative of that, but doing it in this this kind of thing, and we ultimately end up learning that was all fake to begin with. So I hope I'm not spoiling this movie for too many people, man. But Inside Man, please watch Inside Man. Like all the movies we're talking about today are pretty extraordinary. We're kind of skipping over some of the.
Let's skip over. Let's get to the final round.
Yeah. I mean, there's, of course he has more of his like indie resurgence kind of happened later on in the 2000s, 2010. So he was looking at, well, of course he did the bigger budget movie, which was Old Boy.
Which is a remake of the original Old Boy.
Yeah. It's not a good film.
That is regarded as like an all-time great Asian cinema.
The original is fantastic. The new one's not.
This is more like, I remember when Spike Lee was doing this and he was talking about his love for the original and his love for like Asian cinema,
Korean cinema. Yeah, and he loves it. And this movie, is definitely paying homage to, and it definitely connects thematically with what he goes for in terms of like the incarceration.
It's just tough to make a remake of a legendary movie like Old Boy.
Yeah, and it's tough. I mean, the studio kind of butchered it too. They had he originally, how the original had that like nice long take hallway sequence. He shot a version of that that was like more elaborate, kind of the same way that Daredevil. You know how the original Daredevil was just one hallway, and Daredevil season 2 was like all over the place. He kind of did a version of that for this Old Boy, but the studio made him have cuts and cut it up. So it's just one of the examples. I mean, Josh Brolin isn't the greatest in that too, but beyond that, he had like a series. He still has like this series of like independent features, like Red Hook Summer, another movie about religion, specifically about preachers and children. Of course, That Sweet Blood of Jesus, which is the famous Kickstarter movie that caused a lot of backlash. Which is funny. The movie had such a big like uproar and thing in our society, and ultimately it just ended up fading into the background when it came out. It's an interesting movie. It's actually like a vampire flick that's like this weird romance kind of thing. Another thing about sexual liberation that also fits with Spike Lee's thing. But again, he does start doing a lot of like stand-up comedy specials for HBO and all that kind of stuff.
What'd you think of Chirac?
Chirac is his big thing right now, and his most recent big thing, and it's a remake of Do the Right Thing, essentially at the end of the day, but it recontextualizes it into modern day Chicago, which is an epidemic, frankly. It's just at least people dying every day in Chicago right now, which is really unfortunate. But he kind of uses the template that he had with would do the right thing and kind of reinterpolate that, even to the point of casting Samuel L. Jackson again as like another narrator for the story. But it's adapted from the Greek play Leviathan, which is about a group of women who want to end the war between Greece and Rome, so they stop having sex, and then they, to convince the men to stop the fighting, stop the violence, and that's what this movie is about essentially too, in the same way. But instead, it's recontextualized, like I said, for modern Chicago. It's a really powerful movie, man, and of course, our friend Jay Washington. In this film as well. This is one of my personal. I keep saying everything's one of my personal favorite Spike Lee movies because I've seen them all. So like
you have to rank them. Yeah,
the top like 8 or 9 are
because there's so many of them.
Yeah. The top 8 or 9 are prime material for me. And Chirac, yeah, I mean it's great, and you have so much breakout talent in this. Homegirl from Dear White People,
Tessa Thompson,
not Tessa Thompson, who played Coco in that.
Yeah.
She stars in this.
I forget her name. Is it Tiana Paris?
Yes, yeah. Tiana Paris, Nick Cannon,
Angela Bassett,
Jennifer
Hudson.
Yeah, and Jennifer Hudson, by the way, very important movie for her because her family, her family died. It was tragically, right? Shot and killed during a robbery in Chicago, which is really, so for her this was a very personal film, and there's so many layers to the themes they're trying to convey in this movie, having Angela Bassett represent like the older generation of women who are just like, why are you allowing this to happen? Why are you allowing so many kids to die? And John Cusack playing like, again, a preacher who was fighting alongside with the people, alongside advocating against violence, trying to institute peace and resolution between the different gangs. Wesley Snipes playing like the opposing gang member. Again, it's another musical, by the way, in Spike Lee's filmography, and caused a lot of controversy when it came out, particularly with people from Chicago. Really had a negative reaction to this movie. So do you think like this, like him making this movie and making it kind of a musical, but making like the over the top style, do you think that trivializes the violence that's happening in the city? Or do you think it's like artistic representation? He's trying to tell a bigger message using the using the musical and the metaphors, you know what I mean? Like,
it's hard, right? Because the problem is he's not from Chicago.
Yeah.
So it's harder for him to get into that. But I think his heart is in the right place as far as making it that kind of over the top feel, because that's just his style, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, that's just my opinion, but I do see why someone would be kind of taken aback or offended by that, because
like when your friends or family,
it does seem like it's trivializing it a little bit.
Your friends or family have been murdered and because of what's happening in Chicago, and you're as New York guys coming in and making a movie about it, making everybody sing and whatnot. I can see how people will find that problematic. I can see how that happens. But
it's always hard when it comes to violence.
Yeah.
Because when it comes to real life violence that you're referencing, it's hard to deal with that in a sense of levity, if that makes sense.
Right. So yeah, I think the movie's dope though. I think his out of the recent films is probably one of his best. And
we finish up with
of course 2K16, which is funny. The same guy who plays the agent in He Got Game is playing the agent in 2K16.
That's hysterical.
Yeah, it's nice.
There's Rodney King is on his profile here.
Yeah, I think he's doing a documentary on Rodney King. I don't know if it's been released or I haven't seen it released.
Well, yeah.
But yeah, it's again he's doing more Michael Jackson documentaries. He's doing the Black Klansman adaptation of that novel that Jordan Peele is producing.
Yeah.
So
that's coming out, huh?
Yeah.
Later on. It's
later on in the year. Yeah. So Spike Lee, man, he's not into pulling punches. He's into just getting right into it, and I appreciate him as a filmmaker. He's one of my favorite filmmakers, of course. I'm wearing a hat representing.
Would you put him in like what, top 5, top 3?
For my personal
all-time favorite directors.
For my favorite, he's probably like 3, 2, something like that. I'd probably put Paul Thomas Anderson up there, which we're gonna get to an episode film pretty soon.
Maybe even the next one following our Oscars one.
Yeah. We'll see. Yeah, definitely.
We could see that.
And yeah, but yeah, Spike Lee is up there, and I love somebody who gets so political, but yet has so much fun with his movies, has such a style to his movies. You can clearly tell he loves the movies that he's making, and while also having such a career outside of just film, having, doing commercials, doing music videos, doing documentaries, doing
and being an actual character himself.
Yeah,
as far as like being, I mean, as a guy who watches SportsCenter and religiously and First Take religiously.
Yeah,
I mean, in sports podcasts, I mean, he's in everything.
Yeah,
so he's always popping up in all the Knicks games, and every time they talk about the Knicks, he's referenced. Like even talking about someone like LeVar Ball and how he had that interaction with him on the court. And his conversation and his opinion is an opinion that a lot of people take seriously on any topic, whether it be basketball or whether it be film.
Right. And even his hip hop, his contributions to hip hop, man. I mean, without, Fight the Power was such a big thing when it came out and Do the Right Thing. It just moved so many waves for the way hip hop was accepted throughout the American broader culture. So.
As far as mainstream hip hop,
yeah,
putting it into the mainstream.
Yeah, being one of the big contributors when it's one of the big movies coming out during that time. And of course, John Singleton, of course, had a hand in that too with Boys in the Hood. Putting Ice Cube as the front center in that, and using the Eazy-E song as the title, is really, really fascinating and interesting. So
awesome, cool. All right, guys, that was our podcast on Mr. Spike Lee, the legendary director Spike Lee. That finishes up our portion right here. We appreciate you guys. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sticking all the way through. We had a good conversation about it. We hope you appreciated it. If you did, leave us a like, leave us a comment. Let us know what you thought. Let us know what your favorite Spike Lee film is. Let us know what the impact of Spike Lee has on you personally, as far as a person, as far as a student of film in general. And leave us a comment. Let us know what you like. And we appreciate you guys. And we thank you for listening to this episode. I'm Ace.
This is RB3.
And that was the Meaning Of Podcast. We're peacing out, guys.